Sorry, everyone, you missed the first 5 minutes. Anyway, we're talking about the honey room and jarring a 300 kilo barrel of honey all in one go, all in one sitting. And for me personally, we seem to have more and more people asking for raw honey. So there's this non-described honey here in the UK. We've got our honey regulations, and the honey regulations have prescribed descriptions of all of the various types of honey and all of the names that you can use. And raw honey is not one of those names. And it creates a huge stir whenever you talk to beekeepers about it. There's no such thing as raw honey. You can't have raw honey. How do you police it? And lots of other conversations. The problem we face, the challenge we face, is that with the advent of particularly Facebook and Instagram and X and all of these social media channels, we're competing against people from around the world who are describing their honey as raw honey. And I get lots and lots of questions saying, well, what is raw honey? And how do I get my hands on it? And actually, uh, I try to explain to people that the raw honey that we sell comes out of the hive, gets extracted without any heat added to it, goes into a barrel, and then we try to bottle that as quickly as we can before it starts to granulate in the drum. So in the past, we've probably managed to get one full barrel jarred before it starts to granulate and becomes too difficult to pump out and to go through our filling machine. So we become quite limited in that. What we intend to do this year going forward is to try to jar as much as we can going forward. We've got storage for it, albeit limited storage. But then if we want to, we can sell it as naturally granulated honey, naturally set honey. We can sell it as raw honey. And if we then warm it, because it will have been coarse strained, if we then warm it, we can call it runny honey. But warming it, certainly if you warm it beyond a point, it's going to start to destroy some of the amino acids and enzymes that you find in honey. And I guess people call that the goodness in honey. Um, a lot of the people that buy raw honey say they absolutely love it and they stir it into a very hot cup of tea or coffee. So they're immediately destroying any goodness in it anyway. So you just have to kind of take that with a pinch of salt and let them tell you how wonderful it is. Um, but one of the problems, I guess, with raw honey and where maybe the bigger producers challenge this descriptor is if you want to have shelf life honey, you do have to heat the honey beyond a point that the honey is going to start to denature. And uh, so if you read Eva Crane's book on honey, if you go through any of the kind of technical manuals, if you produce runny honey and you take it to, I think the temperature is 62 degrees Celsius, and you hold it at that temperature for 1 hour and then take it out and rapidly cool it, it stops the honey from granulating for a much longer period of time. And this is what the kind of supermarkets want. They want runny honey. My wife was at a local shop, delicatessen coffee shop this morning where we sell our honey. And she said, they've got your honey on display, but some of the runny honey is starting to granulate because it's been on the shelf for a while and it's starting to get cool and it's just doing what honey does. But I refuse to overheat it to that kind of 62 degrees because I don't want shelf life honey. And actually, if it granulates earlier, you can advocate that as a reason why it's so good and why it hasn't been messed about with, because it does naturally granulate. So anyway, the bigger companies that need to produce this shelf life honey have to heat it, and as a result, can't strictly call their honey raw honey. And so you get into this battle with people. And I've had several conversations over the years with bee farmers. I had one particularly heated conversation with one particular bee farmer who was selling oilseed rape as raw honey, and he'd got it labeled as raw honey. And I asked him, he didn't know who I was at the time, and I asked him how he produced his soft set honey because I was a beekeeper and I'd tried producing some. And he said, "Oh, well, we have to heat the honey to kill any yeasts in it. And then we put in some soft set honey to act as a seed and we churn it and it becomes soft set honey." So I said, "Well, so you're heating the honey to quite a high degree then." And he freely admitted that, yeah, he was. And then we got into so you can't call it raw honey. I'll call it what I like. And it kind of nosedived from that position onwards. So I kind of said my piece and walked away. And actually, now we're quite good friends. So it's funny how things turn out. Um, so yeah, I'm off at a tangent here. So we're gonna get as much of our spring and summer honey into jars as we possibly can. Get it tucked away in the back here on some shelves. Excuse the mess. And out in the garage on pallets, and try and work out how much downward pressure we can put on a jar before the jars on top crush it and it bursts open and puts honey all over the garage floor. Um, but we want to try and maintain that because, and this is the point I'm getting to, our raw honey sales this last 12 months have exceeded our runny honey sales for the first time. So we've had more demand for raw honey than we have for runny honey. And in the league table of honey, my personal favourite, soft set honey, is languishing right at the bottom, way down at the bottom. I can't seem to sell soft set honey. Almost can't give it away. I probably could, but it's bizarre how people just don't locally don't want to buy my set honey. It's very spreadable, goes on toast lovely. Perhaps it's because they use it too quickly. I don't know. So that's kind of where we're at. I've got a photograph to share with you. I was saying to Linda before you all stepped through the door. Um, we've had one or two issues with the neighbour. Um, so we've brought the business home. I think we're fairly well soundproofed. Um, so uh, for the last 2 years or thereabouts, we've had some security lights, some bulkhead lights in the garden, and the local cats, regularly come into our garden and do what cats do, which is another topic. But they trip the security lights, and myself and my wife have frequently asked our neighbour, "Is it okay? Do the security lights bother you? We'll sort them out if it's a problem." And the answer has always been, "No, no, it's fine. It's fine." They didn't want us to build this office. They didn't want the garden room put in, and they've erected a 6 foot fence along the border to try and obscure it, which is fine if that's what they want to do, and they pay for it, so that's all fine and dandy. And I got a bit carried away, got a bit excited with my new office a week or so ago, and woke up quite early in the morning, uh, waited until 5:30, and then thought I'm going to pop outside and turn the heater on. So I came out into the office, turned the heater on, went in, made a coffee, and then came back out. Each time, of course, I'm tripping the lights in the garden, and I did that twice, once 5:30 and once at 5 to 6 in the morning. The next day, the neighbour comes round and complains that I'm coming into the garden and tripping the light, and she doesn't mind the cats doing it, but she objects to me doing it at 5:30 in the morning. So I turned them off, and today I've had my little electrician friend come in and steal another load of cash off me to put up some different lights. So I've got a photograph to share that I took literally 2 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, and hopefully it'll be the right screen. That one. Can you see a picture of my garden and not my desktop, hopefully? So the lights on the garage wall actually look quite bright because the camera has exposed for it. But actually, they're only 50-watt bulbs, and it's quite a yellow, quite delicate light, if that's the right description. Um, so that's the office. I've actually fitted, and I'll show you inside in a second. I fitted some blinds on the doors because, again, there was a complaint about being able to see in and me looking out and being able to see the bedroom window. Although where I'm sat at the moment is uh, where our patio was at the end of the garden, and I could look straight across into their house anyway. So there's been one or two little niggles, and I've just said, yeah, no problem, we'll sort it. Yeah, no problem, I'll deal with it. So we've now got these very nice little downlighters outside. Hopefully that will resolve the problem. So here is, uh, I'm tempted to open the door and show you my next door neighbour's house, but I won't. There's my blinds. It's not really beekeeping, and I'm really sorry for this, but it's quite a nice little story, I think. So we had a local company called Norwich Sunblinds come in to give us a quote for some blinds on doors. And I thought, if they want to, I've been online and checked out the price of these blinds, and they're maybe £30, made to measure, maybe £40, but you can get custom sized ones and cut them down a little bit. And I thought, well, if it's 100, £150 fitted, it's going to save me a lot of time. So anyway, the guy comes in, gets his little laser measure thing out and holds it around the door. And you know how tradesmen always go, well, it normally would be quite a straightforward job. But you see these hinges, well, they're going to maybe cause a problem. £350 later, he'd finished his quote. And I said, oh, thank you very much. We'll be in touch. I popped up to, we've got for Linda and the rest of you maybe, Dunelm is a home furnishings kind of store here in the UK. And these were 24, no, no, no. They were £18 each. Only I had to stretch them out on the dining room table and draw a straight line and then cut them down, which I managed to do reasonably successfully. So yeah, £36 later, I've fitted some blinds to the doors. So we're happy there. In another world, this chap that came round to give me a quote for these also quoted us for a fly screen at the back of the house. You'll probably see it in the summer, but at the back of the house, we've got some French doors that open up into the garden. In fact, that's where I took the photograph from. And my wife said, oh, it'd be nice to have a fly screen there to stop all the flies coming in the summer when we throw these doors open. For that, he only wanted £750. And so we're going to get one of those electric fly swat things for my wife and the grandchildren to use. Anyway, that's the non-beekeeping stuff. We're moving all the kit across. We've brought over a couple of tables, the settling tank. It's also acts as our soft set creamer. We've got the appy melter here. That was quite heavy. We had to kind of dismantle it and get it on the back of the truck. Pretty much everything's going on the back of the truck at the moment, so that's quite a relief. We've taken down the wall. I'll take some photographs at the unit and post them for you to have a look at, because I've destroyed the very expensive wall we had built. I have to say the builder that put it up did a fantastic job. there's probably more weight in nails than there is wood, to be honest. It is very well put together. So I've taken that down. We've yet to paint the walls and paint the floor, but we'll do that in a week or two. And the idea is we'll be out of there at the end of February. And at the moment, that's all looking pretty good to get everything home. So we've not been out very much to the bees because this weather has just been ridiculous. It's been drizzly, it's been misty, it's been full on rain. Today it's rained pretty much continually all day, but just that kind of, do I want the windscreen wipers on? Yes. Oh no, I can stop. No, I can't. It's raining again. It's just been continual. Um, so getting out to the bees has been not really at the top of the list because the hefting that we've done in the last month, uh, they they seem in really good shape. Confession time. In one of the videos at the farm, um, well, maybe two confessions. The one that we put the fondant directly onto the top bars. The week before, when we checked them, there weren't many bees on the top bars really. And I said to Steph, it'll be okay. We won't need bee suits. We'll just go in. I'll use the smoker and give them a puff, and they'll all just disappear down into the brood box, and we can just put the fondant on because I don't like crushing bees unnecessarily. And of course, the day we go over there, it's really cold. I'm going to say we forgot the smoker fuel. So because we forgot the smoker fuel, I'm scrabbling around in the back of the truck, and all I've got is um, half a dozen little paper receipts, the cardboard header from some biscuits from the aforementioned supermarket, and nothing else. And so Steph's saying, right, do you want me to record now? And I'm going, no, 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 no. I need to light the smoker first. And as soon as I'm lighting it, there's flames. Those receipts really burn well. And the flames were coming out the top, no smoke. Eventually we managed to get in front of the hive. And you saw, if you've seen the video, I puffed a bit of smoke over the bees. They just didn't want to move. And if you look closely, most of them have got their backsides in the air with their stings out. They're all stood there trying to guard themselves with the stings. And I'm going, I probably should have put a bee suit on at this point. And if you listen closely to the sound on the video, right at the end, you can hear a very loud bzzz, and a bee had landed on the microphone and had then crawled down behind the microphone and onto my jumper. So I didn't get stung. It was all fine. But again, it's one of those things where you tell people, if you feel you need to wear your bee suit, put your bee suit on, and then you don't do it yourself, and run the risk. Uh, but they were fine. So that was a job well done, and they're going to be great with the food that we've given them. One of the questions that I've been sent, and I'll come back to the other confession. Yeah, I can remember the other. I thought I'd forgotten the other confession, but I'll come back to that. Susanna, who unfortunately can't be with us this evening, has said that. Oh, maybe this isn't the question. Oh no, Susanna's asking about condensation. I'm sure there's a question. Maybe it was Joanna. So Joanna and Susanna sent me questions. One of the questions, I think Joanna maybe made a statement about fondant dripping down. Was that you, Joe?
That that was me. Yes,
Ah,
yes,
sorry.
yes.
Yeah.
Because I
So
had like kind of watery honey at the on the baseboard at the bottom.
right. So
Yeah.
uh, with putting fondant on these colonies, you've got to make a judgment about how many bees you've got in the hive, what kind of temperature they're going to maintain within that brood nest area, and the size of the hole or slits in bags that you're going to put into the fondant in order to feed them. And if you put a great big slab of unwrapped fondant onto the top bars and you've got a real large colony in there creating quite a lot of heat, they are immediately going to warm up that fondant and the fondant will run down between the seams. With a large colony, it's not too much of a problem because the bees can kind of work themselves around it. But if you get a warm spell and it's a smaller colony and the fondant drips down, it can be problematic for them because as it drips down into the brood nest area, it then cools, it goes solid again, and it can block up some of the cells that there may be the queen's laid eggs in or they've got young larvae in, and it can be a bit problematic. So you just have to kind of be aware of how the fondant is going to react when you put the fondant onto the colony, the size of the colony, the ambient temperature. At the moment, Linda's got 0 degrees Celsius, and that's the highest it's been for probably a fortnight.
Yep. It's
Uh,
been averaging 3 degrees in the morning, so that's -16, and it goes Celsius, and it gets up to about 15 Fahrenheit if you're lucky, and that's, let's see, that's -9. So it has been bitter, and we had wind chills the other day of in the -20s, and you just try not to go out in that.
yeah.
There've been
So,
times where we would
so
have wind chills -60, and you would literally go out there, and if your hair was wet, it would just freeze. So you have to be
yeah.
careful.
So if you're putting fondant on colonies where the ambient temperatures are those kind of levels, you're probably not going to have too much of a problem with it kind of dripping down. But if you've got a big colony, a big block of fondant that's not protected, as it were, with a cling wrap or a hole in a small hole in a box, then you do run the risk of it dripping down. Joanna, was this your question also about um, balance of feeding against leaving enough room for brood? Or we,
Uh, mine was more about when you take these, I'm under supering,
yeah,
if that's the right term.
it
So when
is.
I take the super out and when I put the queen excluder back again.
Ah, okay. Yeah,
So that
sorry.
might be later, but yeah.
Yeah, well, let's cover that off because I will doubtless forget it if you don't remind me. So I'm kind of looking at first, second inspections. A lot will depend on the weather conditions that we have. I'm not sure. I probably ought to pull up some photographs of last spring because it was really early last year and the bees were building very, very quickly. There's generally not much of a rush. It's when you get that first nectar flow that the bees will start to then fill the brood nest area. And if that congests the queen's laying requirements, then it will force her down into the super. So
Yeah.
it's all about just timing it before that kind of first nectar flow. Check the brood nest, see how much room she's got, and then just shift the queen excluder and stick the queen excluder back in and put the super on top of that. You'll probably find that the super's empty quite early. So something that you can do in that first kind of inspection is to put that super above the crime board.
Up already.
So what I wouldn't do is put the queen excluder in place.
Right.
I'd just keep the super above the crime board, and that kind of gives the bees some emergency space that they can go through into. And generally speaking, the queen won't go up and lay in there unless she's really cramped for space. And it happens, so you have to be ready for that. But at least it avoids the bees going through into the void in the roof and building lots of comb
Going
in
up
that
there.
roof space. But it gives
So
you that emergency space.
I'm sorry, in your podcast I was listening to, you were talking about doing just at the beginning of the season a feed with syrup with some thymol in.
Yeah.
Um, and when
So
would you do that? Before you put the super up or after, or when would you do that in
yeah.
the
So
order?
so that that's really with reference to the nosema problem. So
Yes.
I wouldn't feed light syrup
Oh,
with
oh, okay.
thymol unless you know you've got a nosema
Ah,
issue.
okay.
Uh, it's
Right.
it's it's a really useful method of kind of knocking back the nosema. There's several research papers out there that show a correlation between thymolated syrup and a reduction in nosema, but you can't use it as a treatment because
Right.
it's not an authorized treatment. But everybody uses it. Everybody, a lot of beekeepers use it because it prevents the syrup from going moldy,
Yes.
and that's kind of the way people get this treatment on their hives because it's not a treatment, it's just something to stop the syrup from going moldy. But it has this knock-on effect of being able to pull back the nosema. I
But
I
you,
would
oh,
yeah,
but
sorry.
I'm sorry, but you don't have to feed your bees then at the beginning of the season,
No, and
Jen. Oh, okay.
in fact, I unless you've got a colony that is in real danger of starving,
Right.
I wouldn't feed at all. Uh, I'm at the point now where I'm kind of thinking 2 to 3 weeks ahead, and that takes us to the end of February. And at that point, the weather could break, and it could break in the next fortnight. The bees will start increasing that brood nest area. They'll be out foraging. And actually, there's a fair amount of forage out there. We've got snowdrops and winter aconite. There's hazel out there. I've seen bees on hazel.
Oh,
Uh, there's some daffodils now pushing through, remarkably. So, although we've had that cold snap and it has been chilly, here in Norfolk particularly, we've not really had any severe frosts to speak of, apart from that first week in January. And everything's starting to grow. The tulips are pushing through, so it's all coming along quite nicely.
nicely.
If you feed where you don't have to feed, you're then filling up space that the queen might need
Mm,
for laying her eggs,
yes.
and that can push them into an early swarming scenario if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So uh, at this point, I would not feed unless I had a specific reason to.
Season two. Okay.
Um, and
Great.
if you're going to feed right now, just to complicate things for you, Joe, and I don't want you to suddenly rush out and buy lots of pollen substitute. But if you've got, for instance, if there's a lot of oilseed rape locally that you want to take a
Yes.
crop from, if you're looking to build your bees up in order to maximize that crop, people will start to feed pollen substitute around now so that it allows the brood to build up a bit earlier, and you get more bees ready for
Oh,
that
ready for the,
flow. But actually, probably the most important thing at this time of the year is water, so that the bees have got plenty of water going into the hive, and they can. And let's face it, there's plenty of water out there, so they're in a position where they can utilize the honey stores that they've got. They can water it down and just get that
okay.
brood building. So
Great.
I wouldn't worry too much about getting any food on them
Anything food.
unless they're starving. Get isolated away from the food, and you can
Okay.
see that quite easily. So isolation. Just to finish on that point for you, Joe, if you heft the bees, the hive, and it feels quite heavy, and you think, well, actually, it's still quite heavy. I will take the roof off and just have a quick look. Let's say the sun's shining, it's not raining. You've got an opportunity lunchtime to have a quick look. Pop the crime board off, and if you've a
Okay. Okay.
if there's a relatively small cluster of bees, on one side of the brood box, and most of the food that you can see is on the other side of the brood box, I would investigate that. I would get into the frames where the food stores are and just edge your way up to where the brood nest is and see whether there's food for the bees or not. If there isn't any food, take one of the frames that you've got stores in and just swap it with the one closest to the brood nest area.
Okay.
And it's also worth just using an uncapping fork or your hive tool just to scrape the cappings off some of those cells, because the bees will then get onto it and use it quite quickly. But that's
Yeah.
only if they get isolated.
Last time I looked, they were in the bag of fondant, and there were lots of them in the fondant and all underneath just there. So I have one last question. Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
When I take the super up, like maybe in a couple of weeks if the ever stops raining,
Yeah.
is that when I would change like the base out to kind of clean that up and all of those
Yeah,
things?
yeah. So don't be in too big a rush to do all
No,
of
no, no.
it.
When it's
I
warm,
would,
yeah,
yeah, I would say in March.
yeah, okay.
There's absolutely no need to move that super up anytime soon.
No,
So you
right,
can
March,
see out
yeah.
this month, and if we get a heat wave next week and the sun comes out and it stops raining and suddenly we've got 20 degrees of heat, then maybe you could go against what I've just said.
But
But actually, you can wait until March before you do.
March to, and you can do
Don't.
all of that at the same time.
Yeah, and if you want to talk it through, just drop me a message and we can have a one-to-one chat.
Thank you.
Can I
So
ask a quick question as well, Stuart?
sorry, what was that?
Can I ask a quick question following
Of
on
course
from
you
that?
can. Yeah.
You were talking about, you mentioned feeding pollen substitute.
Yeah.
What's your preferred method of that, and when and how?
So if you haven't got pollen that you've collected and you're going to use a pollen substitute, in fact, I've got if you want to make up your own, I've got a pollen Bee Pro pollen substitute is the one that we used. You just mix it with sugar syrup until it forms a paste.
Right.
And you kind of want a fondant consistency. So you want it kind of the same texture, malleability as a fondant. And you feed it to them in exactly the same way. So you can put it straight onto the top bars, you can put it above the crime board. The very best way, if you want to try something different this year and collect a little bit of pollen from a hive, pop that into the freezer and then just mix that in with some fondant around this time of the year, and the bees will love it. You'll soon find if the bees have a pollen source locally, because they'll stop using the pollen substitute and go off and just use fresh pollen.
Yeah.
And it's the same for anything that you've mixed into some fondant. So if you've got old pollen that you've saved, they'd rather go and collect some fresh stuff. And some colonies will take lots of pollen substitute and others will barely touch it. So it can be a bit hit and miss with different colonies as well.
Last year I tried one of those pollen patty things, and they didn't touch it. It's almost like they hated it,
Right.
They
Yeah.
almost went out of their way to avoid it, so.
And sometimes that's the case. Mark's just popped something rather in his chat box. I'll get very confused if I stop to have a look at it. Oh yeah, pollen supplement, not substitute. Yeah, so call it
Search is out there.
Yeah. So if you're going to give them anything, then some natural pollen that you've collected would be the thing to
What
grab.
product you mentioned that you said you had a bottle of?
So again?
You mentioned that there was a particular product you said that you had and you used.
It's called Bee Pro is the one that I've used, but Candy Pollen Gold, I think, is that the one? That's apparently quite good. Yeah, maybe that pollen sub is eaten by the bees, and they use it in favor of feeding it to the larvae, and the larvae get the pollen. I think for definite, some colonies gorge themselves on it, and others don't. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to have a look at that talk. I I always I'm always quite concerned when people are so definitive about stuff, because there's bound to be a colony somewhere in this world where the bees did feed the pollen sup to the larvae and the larvae did take it, but maybe not. Who knows? I'll have a look at that talk, Mark. That looks quite interesting. Just to go back to the confession that I was going to. Oh, I didn't want to let you guys down and forget it. We were at the farm, so same row of beehives that I was hefting. I did a very quick heft. Steph wandered past with our new camera. I don't, and I've got a question for you all about that. And I hefted them all, and there were a couple that were very heavy, and it was like, they probably hadn't eaten much of their food at all. And we got back in the truck, finished the video, and I said to Steph, I'm just wondering about those colonies. I'm going to just go and check them because they seemed too heavy compared to the others. And it's a valid point that you need to take all of this on board when you're hefting your bees, because they may seem very, very light, but they also might seem very, very heavy. And it's always worth double checking what's going on if you think there may be a problem. Anyway, went back to these two colonies, and I realized that what we'd done in the autumn was we'd taken a couple of the 15-kilo bags of fondant and put them into the feeders on top of the hives, ready to feed to the bees should they need it. But we'd put the feeder above the cover board. So we've got a brood box, a clear plastic cover board, and then the feeder on top of the clear plastic cover board with the big bag of fondant inside. So the bees couldn't get to it anyway. So all I was hefting was a big bag of fondant that the bees couldn't feed on. As it turns out, the bees so I took that off, had a look in the brood box, and they got plenty of food still anyway. So, it wasn't a case of there was a big pile of dead bees because I'd starved them. But yeah, I thought you'd find that amusing, even after all these years. In fact, I think maybe as I get a little bit older, some things are becoming more forgetful. So I might have to start writing a few more notes. But yeah, it made me chuckle, and I said to Steph that I'd confess that one. On our recent videos, have you noticed an improvement in quality? Yeah, no. Has the video been any better? No, no, that's fine. You can say no.
The quality or the actual cinematography?
We've just spent a small fortune on a new camera, and I was hoping that there'd be an improvement in the quality. We haven't actually. We've got a new, a remarkable little camera. It's called a DJI Pocket 3. And it's got a little screen on the back, and the lens is in here. And if I can remember how to turn it on. Oh, there we go. So that's the camera, and it's got what's the word? What am I trying to say? It's stability, image
leveling.
It's a gimbal.
And that's the screen on the back. It's really clever, and you can flip it across so that, oh, that's weird. so that you can do landscape, but then you can also turn it back the other way to do short videos and things like that, which Steph wants to do more of. So we recorded with that last week, and actually on the editing side of things, the image looked incredibly clear compared to the Panasonic SLR that we normally use. But you guys are saying that you didn't see any noticeable difference. So I'll pass that feedback to Steph and she'll be really disappointed. Mark?
You don't think it's just because you've moved offices and cleaned your screen?
I think I've certainly not cleaned the screen. So I mean, maybe my wife or Steph cleaned the monitor for me, but it really did look quite different. The good news is it gives us a bit more mobility because it is this big. I'm hoping that we can get a lot more content recorded when we see something that's of interest. We don't have to get the tripod out and set up the SLR camera and get all the microphones set up. We can just grab this and bring it into the hive and show you what's going on. So that should be quite good. In other news, in and around the apiary, we've had some woodpecker damage. We'll record some video next week, I think, if we can get out when it's not raining. Again, same apiary that we've just done the videos on at the farm, and we actually saw the green woodpecker on a tree fly into the apiary, sit and watch us for about 30 seconds and then fly off. And in one of the hives, it's made a perfectly round hole in the side of the poly material. I kind of, with everything that was going on over the winter, I decided to take a risk and not use lots of chicken wire around them. And obviously we've suffered some damage. But as long as we don't get any hard frosts now, I think we'll be okay. And they're unlikely to come back and start banging more holes in the rest of the hives. Interestingly, the colony that it punched a hole in the side of the brood box is one of the biggest that we've got in that line of hives. Your heart sinks and you think, oh, I bet the cold wind has been blowing through and they've probably all perished. And again, I popped the roof off. And the great thing about the Langstroth with the clear cover board is that you can see immediately what's going on. And it was wall-to-wall adult bees. Every seam, so 11 seams of bees were full of bees. So they're doing okay. And we're just going to sit tight and see what happens. So the green woodpecker wins on this occasion, and I don't think we'll use these sites to overwinter bees again next year because of the green woodpecker. We've got the fishing lakes and the paddock that have got plenty of room, and we don't have any problems with green woodpeckers there. It just makes sense to load them up with lots of colonies. It keeps them all in one place and we haven't got to drive miles and miles. So yeah, that's the only other kind of beekeeping news from this month. Looking forward, we are really in a position where things could change quite rapidly, or they could stay the same. So here in the UK, currently, we've got this block in the weather where we're kind of stuck with low pressure systems coming over the UK, and that's keeping it very cloudy and very wet. And I guess it's keeping it relatively warm as well because the temperatures aren't dropping to anything like they've got over in the States at the moment for poor old Linda. But within a couple of weeks, we're going to be at the end of February and into March, and if it's anything like last year. While I chat, I'm just going to pull up my photos and just see if I can pull up an album from last year, because that will tell us exactly what we had last year in terms of the timing of it. If I can find the right album. 2024.
We've got a hellebore by the back door, and every year for the last 3 years, it's come out at Christmas, and there have been bees on it in
Oh,
January.
really?
This year, not one. It's
Oh,
been
wow.
so cold and so wet. The crocuses are up in the lawn. Not one of them has opened.
Yeah.
Last year we had any, and as soon as you got anywhere like sunny for a still day, there'd be bees all over them. This year, nothing.
It's interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of snowdrops. There's a lot of winter aconite locally. We've got lots of crocuses. We've got quite a lot of crocuses in the front garden, and there is a local beekeeper somewhere near me. And I've seen honeybees actually on the front wall of our house warming themselves when there's been a little bit of sunshine. They kind of cling onto the bricks, and the bricks have warmed up a little bit, and it seems they quite enjoy that. End of Feb, March. Here we go. 7th of March. So this picture, what's the date on this? Share. Sorry about this. Share. That's the 13th of March, so second week of March, and you should be seeing a photograph of oilseed raven flower. So it came on very, very quickly early in the season, and so second week of March we're into the bees and doing some first checks, and from that point on, certainly last year, it just went crazy, didn't it? We had bees all over. Well, this looks like hawthorn in flower, and this is yeah, that's hawthorn. Here's another picture. Honeybees on hawthorn, 14th of March. And actually, we had a huge amount of a huge amount of
That's
nectar
cherry, not
coming.
hawthorn.
Say again?
That's cherry, not hawthorn.
Cherry, prunus,
Or prunus of some kind. It's not
a
hawthorn.
prunus of some sort. So what have we got here? Putting some pollen on the 14th of March. So just topping up some pollen. So yeah, it's not going to be long before we get started. I guess the key is to make sure that the bees have got food, make sure that you don't get them all the way through. You will start to find maybe dead bees at the entrance on the floor. We're getting to that point in the season where a lot of the overwintered bees will start to die, and we're kind of waiting for that first New Year's crop of adult bees to really get going. And it's quite I guess, a dangerous time for colonies, because you've got the adult population starting to drop off quite quickly, and we're waiting for the corresponding increase in brood emergence. So we're topping up with those fresh adult bees coming through right now. So you should have in a reasonably sized colony, you should have quite a lot of brood right now, and the egg laying should have increased significantly, and we'll then get into March, and that's when it really starts to ramp up. But if you've only got a small colony, the issue with a small colony is that the queen will only lay or be allowed to lay eggs and produce brood that they can cope with. So you've got a small colony that can only manage, let's say, a double hand of brood because they're quite small. So you've got maybe 2 frames with brood on. But the danger for that colony is that the adult bees are dying off quicker than new adult bees can come through. And if we get a very cold spell at the end of February and into early March, that's the point at which the colony could collapse and die because it's too cold. I, I've always termed it hypothermic shock because they kind of suddenly get chilled and they just can't maintain that brood nest temperature. So any brood that you've got on the outside, the periphery of that brood nest gets chilled and dies, and that just kind of becomes a self-perpetuating problem. You can't get enough adult bees out, and unless it warms up quickly, that small colony is likely to die out. So it is quite a difficult time for them. All you can really do is make sure that they've got sufficient food. Don't mess about with them too much, and cross your fingers really, because they're on their own. With larger colonies, you get into March, and actually, your mind starts to turn to that reproductive phase of the season, and early swarms. It can happen very, very early if we get a very warm spring. So be mindful of that as well. Steve.
There we go. Yeah, it's 2 questions really, both linked. I've got one hive which is double brood, so 2 nationals, on top of each other. And in this particular colony, there's a buckfast queen.
Okay.
My first question is, when I take the roof off, under there, I've got the Thorns Adaptorique with the Perspex cover.
Okay.
And what I'm finding is the crown board is just covered in bees, literally covered. There is fondant on there. Now I don't know if I don't know what's going on, but when I heft the hive, it's really, really heavy.
Okay.
And my second part of the question is, with that colony, if it's the first time I've ever double brooded through spring now.
Okay.
If there were a situation, and I don't even know if it would happen, that I saw tendencies to swarm
Right.
on a double brood,
Yeah.
would I have to do a double brood demery?
No, I mean, you've got so first off, you've got plenty of time as yet.
Mm.
So there's no real problem. Um, you're feeding fondant, but they're really heavy.
Well, yes, because I mean, when I've hefted it's still heavy, but they went through a whole pack of fondant in about 4 weeks. So
Sure.
I don't know if they're consuming that fondant and not consuming the stored honey.
Yeah,
That's the balance.
that's exactly what they're doing. So bees generally, most of the time, won't store fondant. They'll use it as their immediate food source. So it's quite unusual to find it being stored, particularly if you're in a situation where there's maybe you're feeding fondant late in the season and there's ivy nectar coming in. They'll consume the fondant, but they'll store the nectar from the ivy, and it's kind of like I liken it to being at home with a fridge full of fresh produce and a freezer full of frozen food. Uh, if I'm sensible, I'm going to eat the fresh food in the fridge first before I turn to the frozen, unless it's a cheesecake or something. And then, whether it's frozen or not, it's going to get attacked. But it makes sense to utilize the food that I've got that's available immediately and keep the stuff that is in tins and jars and in the freezer for, dare I say, a rainy day. So we're going to keep it for when we really are short on the fresh produce. And, I think bees are exactly the same. If you give them a supply of food that's open and available, they'll use that and they'll leave all of their stores that they've capped over, and they'll keep that for another time. They'll keep that in reserve. So if you continue to feed fondant, they won't use any of those stores that they've got. And that could, if let's say they've filled both of those brood boxes with stores in the autumn, filled it full of ivy, you keep giving them the fondant, they keep eating it, and they're not now using any of that ivy. That could push them over the edge in the spring when things suddenly explode. The queen doesn't have, because the queen's going to start laying more eggs now, and as we get through into March, it really ramps up. And if she hasn't got the space, the bees are going to go, hang on a second, we've run out of room. We need to find somewhere else, and that will push them into that reproductive phase, the swarming phase, very early. What you need to do is to get that fondant off. If you've got a kind of a mild day, if you get 10 degrees or more and it's not raining, I would get the roof off, pop the crown board off, and have a look at the frames at the sides and see how much food they've got in that top box. What generally tends to happen with a double brood setup is that in the autumn, the bees migrate into the top box. So the brood nest will end up in the top box, and you might find that the bottom box is almost empty. Or it might, because you're feeding fondant, it might be full of stores. So they haven't used it, but they tend to, when the weather is warm enough, and if it's not freezing and they haven't clustered, then it's warm enough, the bees will go down into that bottom box, bring food stores back up, and then recluster, reorganize themselves in the top box and keep that brood nest area warm. So you're likely to find the top box is the heavy one with food stores at either side. The brood nest should be in that top box. And then in the bottom box, you might find that they've used more of the stores in that bottom box. But with that double setup, the great thing is in the spring, and we're not talking February or early March here, we're talking mid to late March, and we'll have this conversation again in March. You can split that box open and you've got two brood boxes, and you can rearrange them so that you can get all of the spare frames that have got space in and around the brood nest area, so that the queen's then got more space to lay into. If you find actually that it's all full and you haven't got any spare space, you could take out some of the frames of food and give them some foundation if you haven't got drawn comb, or if you've got healthy bees, you could take an empty frame from another brood box and swap it over and give it to the colony that's expanding fast. So there's an awful lot of things that you can do. If at the end of the day you get towards the end of March, early April, and they start throwing up queen cells, well, then you've got lots of opportunities to produce new queens. Obviously, if it's a buckfast, you shouldn't have too many queen cells, and it might be fun to produce some queens from that. But you could split them in half, literally split the boxes in half and turn them into a single brood colony again, with a queen cell in one and the original queen in the other. You could split it down into multiple nukes with a queen cell in each of those nukes to see how that queen rearing goes. You could make up just a couple of nukes and still split the box in half. There's so many opportunities for you, and I would take advantage of it. It'd be a great time to play around with some queen rearing without having to worry too much about what's happening. And it's the perfect time for queen rearing. The bees are set up in order to raise queens. That spring growth is absolutely perfect for producing the very best quality queens that you can. So I think we'll probably have this conversation next month. And again, if you want to chat directly one-to-one, we can have that conversation as well. But yeah, now's not the time to worry too much about what might happen or what's going to happen. And for everybody, particularly the newer beekeepers, you've got to really sit on your hands and wait for the weather to get going before you start getting into the bees. You can do more damage than good early in the season by getting a bit excited and inspecting them when actually you're probably best to leave them alone. And honestly, that'll be next month at the earliest. So yeah, we're
Quick question.
looking. Yeah, Gainer.
Sorry, it's on a similar vein. So my hives were really light going into the winter, so they've been on fondant all the way through, and they're taking that down really well. My hefting skills are rudimentary at best. I can't tell you if it's heavy or light because I've only got one full hive and one nuke, so I've got
Yeah.
nothing to compare against. So they're currently over about 8 seams of beans. I've got a clear cover board so I can see where they are, so they're doing fine. I was going to add an empty brood box underneath in a few weeks, just so that if they need space, they've got it. But it's going to be a good few weeks before we're 10 degrees because we're sort of mid Scotland. Is that a horrific idea or is that a reasonable idea?
Yeah, so I would again, you're absolutely right. Hold off until the weather warms up and the bees really start to get going. Uh, Honestly, I'd stick the brood box on top.
Okay,
So wait
okay,
until
cold with the heat rising up.
yeah. So wait until and this is exactly what we do in the spring with the oilseed rape. So and I don't know if you've got any. Will you have oilseed rape locally? Will you have anything?
Honestly, no.
Okay. So what you're looking for is the first spring nectar flow, really. It could be willow, it could be hawthorn, it could be oilseed rape, it could be
What
any number of
hawthorn?
things. But you want to see some nectar coming in, and you want the bees almost to be getting a little bit congested.
Okay.
Uh, and I suspect for you, you're going to be talking 2 or 3 weeks later than the point at which we're doing it down in Norfolk. So actually, you'll probably see a video of us doing it before you have to do it. If you put the brood box on top, what tends to happen is the adult bees go up, and I would make it all fondant unless you've got some really nice, sorry, all foundation, unless you've got some really nice drawn
No,
comb.
your foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, get the bees going up into it. The adults will go up and start drawing in the middle. So the central frames are where the heat will be rising most. The outside frames will still remain quite cool. The bees will go up and chimney. So we call it a chimney because the bees will have a brood nest area that goes straight up and down the middle, and they'll leave the outside frames. But they will gradually move across as you get warmer and you get a greater nectar flow. The bees will draw the comb out to the outsides. And once they've drawn all of that, you'll probably find yourself late April, May time, I suspect, if not mid-May, because of the temperature differential. And at that point, for me personally, that's when we put supers on to grab the almost the last week or two of the oilseed rape. And what we find here is that it prevents any granulation in the comb. So if you've got oilseed rape, you don't get nasty granulated honey that you can't extract because the bees are using it to produce a new brood nest, an expanded brood nest. Queen excluder goes on top, then a super on top of that, ideally drawn, but if not, foundation's fine. At that point, you're in the realms of overnight temperatures being warm enough that it doesn't chill. So you get a situation where the nighttime temperatures, we're not getting frosts anymore. For me, that's usually around early May, late April, early May. Certainly last year it was, well, no later than the third week of April, I think. And at that point, the bees will just continue to fill the super with honey. The queen will go up and fill as many of those cells with brood as possible. And you'll end up on a double brood setup.
Yeah.
At that point, you've then got a crop of honey in the super, and you've got a double brood scenario that you can again use in a huge array of different options. So if you only want one single brood box, you could literally take that bottom brood box away, and you've got nicely drawn comb in the top box, render down the old comb, and you've completely replaced all of that wax, and the bees will love you for it. You could run it on a double brood if you've got a particularly large colony. So if the bees that you have traits that produce a large brood nest,
So
then
I've
it might,
got fast queens. So
yeah. So they'll certainly produce a big brood nest. So you might want to keep them on a double brood for as long as you can, in order to maximize the number of bees that are then going to go off foraging.
switch between single and double depending on the time of year. So double them up until the honey flow, and then go down to a single whilst I've got supers on, and then coming towards autumn, go back to double brood. So they've got a bit more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And if you get the queen into the top box, so let's say you want to take that bottom box away, the comb is fine, or alternatively you want to use the top box. If you trap the queen in one or other of the brood boxes and put a queen excluder between them, then you've got your queen stuck in one brood box. You can let all of that brood emerge, and then you can take those frames out, keep them somewhere safe, ready to reuse later in the year. Or if they're old comb, you can render them down and just put some more foundation in towards the end of the season and
That
get the bit.
fun was just the timing, and because I'm not very good at hefting, I don't want them to run out of space. So I didn't know whether by putting an extra brood box below would mean the heat still stayed where it was, where the cluster is, but with
Sure.
space if they need to. Or do you think I'll be absolutely fine until they're bursting at the seams, and then
Yeah.
once we're 10 degrees and I can check?
Statements like absolutely fine and
Yeah, I'm going to
beekeeping,
blame you if it goes wrong.
you
Yeah,
know, yeah, it's fraught with danger to make such a statement.
like
Um, it's unlikely to be a problem, um, but at that point you'll be inspecting anyway,
yeah,
so you'll be into. Whereas, I don't want you to be jealous about this, but we will have performed probably 3 or 4 weeks worth of inspections before you are able
I
to
will
get
still be
into them.
staring through the plexiglass, wishing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So what you can do is, join in the conversation, see what we're talking about, watch the videos, see where my bees are, knowing that we're in the wimpy south and that it's all kind of nice and warm down here. And then you can adjust. And once you get some temperatures up into the mid double figures, so maybe 13, 14, 15 on a still sunny day, get out and do some inspecting, see where they are. And at that point, you can make a judgment call. One eye on the weather. Maybe the next fortnight's going to be really warm and dry. And you might make that decision of putting another box on them. Look at the forage that is coming in, what's happening around you, and just try and get a real overview of what's happening out there in the natural world for the bees. And is that the right time to then put the box on?
right. Very much.
And that's, yeah. And then you're in the same position as the rest of us, trying to make the decision as to when we're going to do it and whether that timing is going to work out or not. Yeah, so yeah, it'll work out really well, I'm sure. Um, so I had a question from Susanna, and I want to just check this with everybody and talk it through with everybody. So the message was, I check my bees regularly by looking at the entrance and pulling out the Varroa board and having a look and cleaning it up. Always a good thing to do. Even when it's not been raining, not many days, but most of the Varroa boards are always running with water. Susanna's got 14 by 12 poly hives and left a super of honey on each hive in the autumn to see them through into the spring. They've got a fair bit of space, and they do seem to be reasonable colonies. There do seem to be a reasonable colony of bees in all but one of them. The crime board, I think this is possibly the one that isn't as big as the rest. The crime board under the roof has condensation, which I wipe off. Should I leave the Varroa boards out or half out? Any thoughts, please? I keep being advised that cold doesn't kill colonies, but dampness does. I don't think the bees particularly like damp weather. And we've never left Varroa boards in over the winter previously, but now we do keep them enclosed. We're kind of almost going back to solid floors. And actually, a lot of the colonies propolize the Varroa screen at the bottom. With the honey pour, we've only a relatively small Varroa screen at the bottom, and a lot of the colonies are just propolizing it up. So we don't mess around with it. We just leave them to their own devices. I think in this instance, it's probably condensation that is either coming down the side walls and dripping down onto the Varroa board, or maybe the Varroa board itself is catching the condensation and forming condensation. Mark, did you want to jump in?
We bought 2 polyhives last year at the spring convention, thinking insulation. We leave our Varroa boards in all the time, take a bath to clean them. This way we insulate heavily. None of our wooden Varroa boards, and they're all wood, we swapped out the wooden ones, got rid of the Corex ones. None of the wooden boards have any moisture on them at all. The 2 Abelo hives, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to mention the lake. The 2 Abelo hives, you pull the Varroa tray out and there's half an inch of water in each one.
Right.
And I don't think it's condensation, because there is no condensation on the crown board, which you can see.
Okay.
None of our, we all have all clear crown boards, none of them have any condensation. I think, because we've discussed this being back, I think the polyhives, the interface is so smooth that the bees don't propolize it very well, and literally water is just coming in. Because then you look at the frame runners swimming in water.
Okay.
So I think water is getting in and then running down.
Right.
And I even tried pulling the tray half out to do the old thing and let a bit of ventilation. Yeah. Not that. It's not coming in the front. It's coming in the sides and going down. So we won't be buying any more polyhives. Okay. The new ones have got ridges on to stop that, but they're 10 frame and you can't mix them in wooden boxes because they won't sit properly.
Sure.
That's my observation, right?
Yeah, I've got an Abelo nuke and I'm finding a lot of water in the roof. I obviously haven't lifted the crown board off to look inside, but I'm getting a lot of water in there and I couldn't work out why. Because it's strapped down as tight as I can get it. Still getting water coming in there that I'm kind of mopping out.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't say, Susanna doesn't say which brand of 14 by 12 hive it is. I want to say Maisma. I don't know if I just made that up, or whether me and Susanna have had that conversation. Certainly, in terms of the water in there, it needs any amount of condensation that you're seeing on Varroa boards, I would clean off and just wipe them down. If there's condensation on the underside of the roof, I'm not sure where that's getting in from, and I'm guessing the roof. So with my honey pour roofs, they sit down like a traditional roof, so they come down the sides. but we've got a couple of other brands, a Swenty, and what's the other one that we've got? Oh, we've got a couple of Paradise Honey Nukes, which actually have worked really well. But the roofs sit flush on those, so it could be that some moisture is getting in underneath them. We have had a lot of rain. I think the best thing I can do is have a conversation with Susanna to talk it through and find out exactly what is going on. But it could be that it's not condensation, as you say. It might just be that it's been so wet and so damp that it's just a continual dampness and weather that's getting in there and causing the wet. But certainly cleaning off the road boards and things like that needs to be done as regularly as you're out seeing your bees, because then you get a better idea of what's happening inside the hive. But yeah, it's interesting, Mark, that you say you're getting water ingress at the joins, because
we've considered running some Vaseline around the interface so that when you squish them together, it forms a barrier, and of course it makes it easier to get off again.
Yeah,
we haven't done it yet because it's winter, but next year
yeah,
we might just do that as an experiment.
Yeah, it's worth considering.
You don't want to gather something because then you rip all the paint off. And it's...
yeah, absolutely. I don't think we've answered Susanna's question particularly well, but I think it needs more information. We need to find out exactly what hives they are, and maybe I'll ask her to take some photos so we can see what's happening. Okay. Has anybody got any other questions? Any comments?
Not necessarily a question for tonight, maybe to cover it another time. This year, hopefully, will be my first year extracting. So I appreciate you've done videos for extracting on scale if you've got 50 plus hives, and you kindly did a series this year or last year now around extracting like one hive where you do the sort of, crush and strain. But I guess I was looking for advice. I don't know whether it's from you, Stuart, or the group in general, around what kind of equipment to purchase for sort of 5 to 10 hives. So I don't want to do a manual crush and strain with that many because I'll go loopy. Also don't want a 50 frame extractor in spending, my life savings on equipment. But just getting some guidance, particularly as, want to be able to get a deal if I can, just in terms of size of extractor, whether you bother with stainless steel settling tanks, whether you just use plastic ones. I haven't got space for a honey room, so everything's going to have to be stored in a tiny garden shed and hoiked into the house for extracting. And I have an energy limiting health condition, so just want to be as efficient as possible. Really, God would be appreciated.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think we can all probably come up with some answers as to what everybody's kind of using. Prior to scaling up for me, the first piece of stainless steel kit I got was a 25 kilo settling tank, and that came with a strainer system on top that just clipped into it, and that worked really well for a time. I think if you're going any larger than 25 kilos, you need to think closely about the gate that you have on the honey gate to let the honey out into your jars. The plastic ones tend to get pushed out with the pressure of the honey that's in the larger tank. So when you close the gate, if you don't do the wing nut up tightly, it kind of pushes out and then you start getting honey dripping down. So in terms of settling tank, up to 25 kilos, a plastic tap is okay. Over and above that, I would try and go for a metal one. My personal preference is stainless over polypropylene food grade plastics. That's just personal choice. I've actually got a Thorns settling tank plastic bucket with a yellow plastic tap on it. And I think we used that last year. That worked perfectly fine. And so you don't have to go for stainless steel. I'll shoot a video showing that as well, because we will use it in the new setup that we've got. Extractor, if you've got the room for a radial extractor, I think that would be my preference over a tangential extractor. And then again, you've got self-turning extractors, which are lovely, but they're even larger still. So I would tend to go radial.
Yeah, I've also got a narrow door to get it through, so I can only
Okay.
go up to about 700. Not, can't get the big, because I was looking at the tangent. I was looking at the like automatic tangential and swing frame.
Yeah,
That's awesome, but I can't get it through the door. So yeah, it was just how much it's worth investing, because I'd rather buy the right stuff now for the next sort of 5-10 years, rather
yeah.
than buy something cheap this year and then spend a bit more next year and a bit more the year after and end up spending more than I need to.
Maybe for our next session, I'll throw the question out there. If you could remind me, Gaynor, we'll we'll throw the question out there. What would you buy if you've only got a 600 mil wide door to get your kit through, and you've got to use a kitchen, and you've got to take it back out, and you've only got 15 hives or some such number? Um, I'm sure people have some views on what they're currently. I know Mark's got some views on what he's currently.
I've got a 20 frame radial extractor, and it's only 600 millimeters wide anyway.
I was looking at like
So you could get it's too big, to be quite honest, for what you've got. It's too big for what I've got. But you could get a sort of 12 frame one that's going to be 450, 600 wide.
yeah, I could find nice. It was whether I'm spending more than I need to because I'm all the gear, no idea, or whether I'm being realistic about, because I'd love an automatic one so I can be uncapping whilst my frames are spinning, just in terms
Go for electric. You don't want to go for one you've got to use manually. Go for electric.
Oh, that would put me in hospital, I think. Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you said you've got 10 hives.
So, well, at the moment I've only got 2, but I'm going for 6 to 8 is what I've got room for. That's what the Mark's going. It will never be what she says it is.
I love it. We all said the same thing. Don't worry, you're not alone.
Yeah, it'll be double that. No, that's what I've got room for, is sort of 6 to 8. So that's what I'm trying to do. Otherwise, I need to expand my apiary massively.
I mean, even a 9 frame extractor will do a 1/4 super, won't it? So I mean, and while that's spinning, you can be uncapping the next one.
Yeah.
A 900, a 9 frame one's going to be about 450 millimeters wide, I'd have thought. So
yeah, I can get a 20 frame radial automatic extractor, and it fits through the door, but it's also like 1,500 quid. And is it worth that investment because it will last me for the next 10 years, or am I just splashing cash for no apparent reason and I could spend 500 quid and just spend a bit longer? I think that's where I'm looking for the advice of experience rather than the advice in a sales brochure.
And we will talk about this next month.
Thank
But
you.
what I would say is most beekeepers buy an extractor, then they buy another extractor because the one they had isn't quite big enough, and then they buy another extractor.
And this is
My house. He's been to my house.
So it can be one of those things where you think, actually, do I really want to spend £1,000 on an extractor, £1,500 on an extractor? So I'll only spend £600. And then 2 seasons later, you're thinking, well, this is taking forever. I've got 20 hives now, and I really should have bought that bigger extractor when we had that conversation. Yeah, I mean, you've got to have a lot of willpower to stick at 6 or 8, because the bug will kind of bite you and it just becomes more and more fun. And actually, that's how I feel about it. But as you scale up, the workload doesn't increase in the same manner. So extracting 2 hives is jumping up to 4 hives doesn't give you twice the work, because you kind of you fall into a routine, and by the time you're doing 3 or 4 hives, 8 hives, obviously there's numbers that increase, but you get into a routine, and I find that I can extract 20 hives almost as quickly these days as if I'd had 10 hives way back then. One of the other things you'll need to be mindful of is the way the bees draw their super frames, because if they're nice and straight and you can uncap them evenly, you can put them in your extractor and walk away from it. But very often, if it's a little bit uneven or you've got some granulation in some of the frames, you turn your back on your extractor and it's dancing across the kitchen floor for you. So it's sometimes it might need an extra pair of hands. But Mark, you've got a hand
Yeah,
raised.
things that didn't catch you out. We use plastic segment tanks, by the way. The thing that caught us out this year, and we're 4 or 5 years down the line, we suddenly had a really good year on 15 hives. We had a fourth surprise buckwheat harvest, and we sat there in the kitchen having done all our extraction, and we had 27 buckets of honey, having given 3 to the neighbour and sold 5 earlier in the year. Where do you put 27 buckets of honey? So you've got to think about that. And when they're empty, where do you store the empty buckets?
Hives, see, I've got nowhere to put the honey if I get it.
Well, that's my point. When you're thinking ahead, get a big extractor. That's great. But then if you get 4 or 5 hives in a good year and you use that extractor for 3 hours, you're going to have buckets of honey coming out of your ears. And you can't store them indoors because it's too warm. And you can't store them in a leaky old shed because you get spiders and cobwebs and stuff. So it's got to be, you've got to think of it. No one told us, did they? There's a lot more to it. Things catch up on you. Whatever you buy, you'll want to improve it 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things, yeah.
I just don't want to spend a fortune on kit I never use. I'd rather invest in.
You can always sell. Everyone here will be the same. Once you try to upgrade or downgrade, there's always somebody who will buy it off
you. Yeah, that's very true.
Thank you.
Next month we'll come up with a list of a shopping list for you, and
appreciated.
There'll be as many different lists as there will be attendance to the
I'll take an average and go with the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments or questions or discussion points?
That Mark was just telling us that getting a lot of honey one year is really bad news. I mean, I
didn't say it was bad news. I said it was a challenge. The missus thought it was bad news. I thought it was brilliant. And we're selling it like there's no tomorrow.
I can think of more challenging things, that's all.
Yeah. It's the 20 nukes that accumulated in the back garden she wasn't too keen on either.
Yeah, when I say 8 hives, that doesn't include the 4 nukes I've already got waiting. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Well,
okay.
On myself. I mean, I don't sell honey. I give it to friends and things like that. And I have probably 9 5-gallon tubs down in my basement that are solid. And I'm like, what on earth am I going to do with this stuff? So I ended up selling one to a club member who wanted to scoop it out and give it as Christmas presents, thank goodness. But it does sound like a ridiculously positive problem to have. But, if you don't have a steady market for it, and how many jars can you give friends? I give my friends a lot of jars. And I still have a lot. I have more in my honey house that are just sitting there even from last year. So
you have to store the empty jars too, don't you? You have boxes and boxes of jars, empty ones, full ones. Storage is going to be your issue.
Yeah, I'm going to have to build an extra shed. I know.
That's what I did. I had to get the bikes out of the shed, insulate it.
I'm mid-terrace and there's a big, huge field at the bottom, which is where I keep my bees, but that's not my land. I've got permission for bees there, but not permission to build a huge shed. So I can't give up half my garden to have a wonderful honey room and storage shed. It's got to be, extractor or the settling tank is also my creamer. It's got to be, as compact as possible and fit through the door. Yeah.
We'll work on it. We'll have a think and come up with a list for you.
I'm going to go and measure up that door as well before next time.
We'll probably need some door measurements. I think that's the key.
I will measure, yes.
Great. Anything else, anybody? No?
So I'm going away on holiday in mid to late March. And
right.
My weather in mid to late March is not going to be spring-like. As I mean, I'm just sitting here listening to snowdrops and this, that, and the other. Gosh, so I won't see those until March, and I've been feeding fondant to them. I've got about 10 colonies, and I don't think it's going to be warm enough that I have to worry about an excessive amount of brood. I could put a spare super on each one just in case. Um, what would you worry most about if you were going to leave your hives or your colonies alone as spring comes?
For me personally, I think the challenge is knowing when to stop feeding them fondant and when the weather is going to break, and giving them enough space within the colony structure that you've already got. So rather than adding more space to them at that point, trying to get in to have a look before you go away, stopping feeding fondant at an appropriate point. So that, again, that very much like the conversation we had earlier, judging the point at which you want to stop feeding so the bees use as much of the stores as they possibly can without tipping them over the edge into that kind of starvation phase. Because once they're starting to grow in the spring, they can starve very, very quickly because they need that food coming in. Um, so your winter breaks when? End of March?
Yeah, early April maybe.
Early April?
We've had
And
snows in May, but that's unusual. Like
yeah,
much
how long are you going away for?
12 days.
Okay.
Terrible. I mean,
I think, honestly, I think I'd just let them get on with what they're doing. I would pull the feeding uh,
we've only
fortnight before you go,
the only
maybe.
problem maples. There may be some maples, but we have the same problem you do. If it's raining and the maples are
Yeah,
flowering and the bees are inside, it's not going to
yeah,
help.
yeah. I
Sorry,
would. Yeah, if you're feeding now, I would heft once the snow's off the hives. Once you can get a hand under the hive to heft them, um, I would heft them, make sure that they've got sufficient food currently, and pull the fondant and let them eat the food stores that they've got. And then before you go, take a look at the weather forecast, have a view on what's likely to happen. And if you need to, put the fondant back on at that point so that you're giving them some food stores to take them through maybe a couple of weeks of terrible weather. The weather's suddenly changed and they're getting a little bit light. But if you keep feeding them now, then they're not going to use the stores that they've got, and you could come back to a colony that's starting to throw up queen cells. And I mean, it's still going to be very early for you, isn't it? So uh, I don't think March you're going to have too much to worry about. But
we've been
never say never. That's beekeeping, unfortunately.
in February, so that I know I can leave them fed up and then come back, but this is
Yeah,
this was the earliest we could book this vacation, so
yeah.
try.
I don't think you'll probably have much to worry about.
Probably not.
Maybe.
Oh,
Got
April meeting.
to hedge your bets in this game, haven't you? You really have. Um, yeah, so you'll be at the next meeting, the
Yeah, I'll be
10th.
meeting.
Yeah, so let's have a look at where you're at then, and you can dash out and put some fondant on if you need to. But yeah, I would think end of Feb, pull the fondant if you've still got fondant on them, and they've got enough weight so that they feel heavy, because that'll give them some space for the queen to lay in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, maybe. See how you get on. Cool. Okay. Uh, I'm going to be completely out of the old unit by the time we meet up next time. Everything will be done and dusted so I can focus on some beekeeping. So that'll be nice. And in a similar vein to the problems you've got with Space Gainer, I'm going from this monster unit down into the back end of the garage and this little office. And the point that Mark was making about jars, I don't really currently have space in the garage for a 1 meter by 1200 pallet stacked full of jars. So we had to decant them into large cardboard boxes. And unfortunately, we'd got 3/4 of a pallet of jars, which are now occupying 14 boxes. And they're about 600 mil square boxes. So they're large boxes. And thank goodness we've got the workshop, because I haven't really got anywhere here at home to put them apart from the bedrooms. And that's not going to go down very well if I start using the bedrooms. So it's a similar issue in thinking about the equipment that we're going to use. So hopefully next month we'll have some solutions to share. I might have to ask for some advice as well, Mark, Gordon, Steve, Ian, Linda, Alan, Gaynor, Joe.
Help.
Help. I don't know what to do. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I had to just quickly. I ran out of space. I had a garage full of it. I had conservatory full of beekeeping equipment and all around the house. And I've had to go and hire a 25 square foot unit in one of these big storage facilities.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, they're not expensive, and when you consider the cost of the beekeeping equipment, all of the boxes and everything else, it's not that expensive. But that's the only way I've been able to cope now. So it's all out the house and it's all secure. But it's working well for me anyway.
I'm going to have to build a new shed. I'm just trying to figure out how small I can make it without ending up having to build a third shed. So yeah, right.
You've got that the wrong way round, going. You need to be saying how big you can make it.
I live in a terraced house. My garden is tiny. Yeah.
Just follow Linda's advice and give your neighbours lots and lots of honey, and get a shipping container hoisted over the roof or something.
Right, that's the whole garden, the shipping container. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Cool. We'll try and resolve some of those problems next month.
Amazing. Thank you.
As ever, it's lovely to see you all. Lovely to chat. Thanks for coming along this evening. Any issues, drop me a message. There'll be more videos. We'll shoot a video of the honey room this week just to show you how that's progressing. And yeah, podcast will continue to tick over. As we get to the end of the month, then we'll really start to think about some inspections. So that's quite exciting for us here in Norfolk. Not so in Linda's neck of the woods or for you, Gaynor, but yeah, we'll see where we get to.
It'll come.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming along. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend.
Bye, everybody. Next time.
Cheers.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.